All right.
Hello?
Would you come down, please?
Yes.
By the time they're down, I'm sure you will.
Pardon me?
By the time they're down, I'm sure you will.
Okay. Okay, you may be seated. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's still morning. Sorry, it's been a long day. Doctor, talking about generally stippling, stifling, comes if this, I'm holding up the pointer, the back end of the pointer, the thick end, the barrel of the gun here. Do we have agreement with that?
Yes.
If this gun fires a projectile, the first thing that comes out, and I'm not saying in order, but what would show nearness is soot stippling, correct?
Correct.
And then further out would be gunpowder stippling.
Yes, soot and then gunpowder.
Okay, and in the soot stippling, it has to be, generally speaking, as you said, either in contact or within a foot.
Yes, it's within a few inches. It's very close.
Okay, and when you looked at the state's exhibit, you said it was either very close or in contact, and we're talking about the hand wound.
Yes, it could be within that range. Okay. So it could have been in contact.
Okay, and as I said, if this is the barrel of the gun, this is my left hand, the barrel of the gun had to be somewhere in this area, correct?
That's correct.
Now, the soot stippling, and I'm pointing with the pointer to my baby finger, there is no soot stippling here, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. The bulk of it starts between what would be the ring and commonly referred to as middle finger?
Yes.
Okay, so that means the barrel of the gun, if not touching, would have been like this.
It's in that location, that's
Okay.
correct.
So that hand was over the barrel of Mr. Rittenhouse's gun when his hand was shot.
That makes sense.
Okay, and the bullet goes into the fingers and then out through here. And I'm showing the fat part of the between my index and thumb.
Yes, the exit is to the index finger, but it's on the back of the lateral side of that finger, yes.
And exhibit 105, please. What we just went over, I'm showing you an exhibit be up on the screen. It's been marked Defense Exhibit 105. You see that photo exhibit?
Yes,
Okay, and that's Mr. Rosenbaum's hand,
his left hand, correct?
left hand, and you took that photograph, correct?
Yes,
Circle on here to the best of your ability where the soot starts.
yeah.
Okay, can you draw a line off of there into where it can be seen and then just put your initials? Thank you. And you've put the circle on the ring finger, correct?
Correct,
Leaving the baby finger uncircled and blank, correct?
correct, I don't
'Cause
see
there's-
any,
You don't see any soot there, right?
correct.
Would move exhibit 105 into evidence.
Objection?
No,
Proceed.
Would ask to publish it to the jury.
it's already on the
The
screen.
objection. Okay, go ahead.
The- Now, you would agree that this shooting of Mr. Rosenbaum, which is captured partially on video, is a dynamic situation, correct?
Correct,
And if the furthest he was away with the stifling that you see in the wounds was 4 feet and closing, that goes very quickly, correct? If someone's running at you,
yes,
okay? And 4 feet, correct me if I'm wrong, is about from me to you away.
that's about correct,
And if I had my hands out, I'm even closer, correct?
yes,
If I'm lunging and going for your gun, which is an extension away from your body, closer still.
yes,
And you saw the video that Dr. Jensen reviewed, and he was running, correct?
he was,
The wound in the back, when you talk about, I cannot say that word, anatomically correct position?
atomic position, yes,
Ato- That's, as I'm standing here before you, standing straight, with you said palms forward.
correct, anatomic position.
Okay.
I think you had me doing it,
Okay. And the wound enters his back,
that's correct,
okay, and goes down and across.
correct,
Okay, we're not, and I know the prosecution covered it, but we're not saying that he was turned and shot in the back, correct?
that's correct,
There's nothing in the hand shot that shows him, would lead you to believe that his hands are up like this surrendering, correct?
that's correct, I did not see that in the video.
And your theory or your belief to a reasonable degree of medical certainty is that he's in a horizontal position close to my client. The bullet goes in and across and down.
That's correct,
Okay? So once again, in the position of lunging would put you in a horizontal position, correct?
it would,
And there's some stippling to the wound in the pelvis, correct?
Yes, to the lower abdomen above
Okay,
it,
and that's not trying to, but there, it starts at the belt line and goes up, correct?
that's right,
Okay, and as it starts at the belt line and goes up, the reason it's not below the belt line is because he was wearing pants when he was shot, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that was gunpowder stippling.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's basically 1 foot to 4 feet.
Yes.
And hate to jump around here, but the wound on Mr. Huber, I'm assuming at some point you pulled off that bandage that was on the wound?
Yes,
Okay, now, was there stippling on that wound?
there was, yes.
Okay, and that wound was what kind of stippling?
Well, gunpowder stippling, so that wound has the impacts from the gunpowder particles.
Okay.
A more dense distribution.
Did you look at the clothing around the wound?
On Mr. Huber?
On Mr. Huber?
Yes.
Okay, and the clothing also had gunpowder residue?
A little more difficult to say on the clothing. Mr. Huber's tank top, which was the item of clothing that came with him, that tank top it was a tie-dyed black and gray and white appearance, so made that very difficult. So in those situations, usually I will defer to try to opine if I can't tell for sure.
Okay, so there's nothing in that gunshot wound that suggests that he wasn't in close contact with my client's firearm?
That's right.
Okay, and did you look at any video regarding that shooting?
Yes, it's also included in that video provided.
The video shows that my client's lying on his back, correct?
Yes,
Mr. Huber grabs the firearm, correct?
it appears so, yes.
Pulls the firearm from one direction towards and into his chest, correct?
They end up in that position. I don't know if he's pulling or what. I don't know what's going on there.
Mr. Huber strikes him with the skateboard. The gun is not in his chest. Fair statement?
That fair statement.
Okay. When he's shot, the skateboard is in his right hand. The gun is now up in his chest.
I would object, these are conclusions based on,
I'm asking if his wound is consistent with this scenario.
Go ahead. Finish your question.
Okay. I'll start over. Mr. Huber, you see him hit my client in the head with a skateboard, correct?
Yes.
And
The objection?
these are conclusions that Mr. Huber hit or did anything is central to this case. These are not conclusions that anyone can make but the jury.
He said, the doctor said he watched the video, and so I'm assuming that that's his knowledge base, and you can redirect on the subject if you want.
I'll start again, sir. There is a blow from Mr. Huber to my client's head with a skateboard, correct?
Yes, the skateboard makes contact
Okay.
with Mr.
He swings the skateboard with his right hand into my client's back neck range, correct?
I'm not sure where it makes impact, but
You see an impact.
yeah, it makes contact.
And he reaches down with his left hand, seeming to grab my client's gun, correct?
Yes.
When he puts his hand on the gun, the barrel is not pointing in his chest, correct?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
Okay. And through whatever movement between my client and Mr. Huber, the gun barrel ends up, which would be right about here,
It does.
okay? And there's a gunshot, correct?
Yes.
And that gun is touching his clothes.
It's in intermediate range. It's
So,
closer.
and define intermediate range for me, please.
Well, again, we've talked about how intermediate range injuries can be within 4 feet, but it obviously from the video it's closer than that. But I can't say whether the muzzle is in contact with
Okay.
his
But
clothing.
through the type of stippling that you have on the Huber wound, you know it's less than 4 feet. Fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Through independent evidence, which you review as a forensic pathologist / investigator, the video evidence establishes closer.
It does.
And just assume, for the purposes of this question, that the first shot from my client, moving back to Mr. Rosenbaum now, is the 0 shot, number 1. The fourth shot is 76 hundredths of a second after that. That is how fast the 4 shots were fired out of my client's gun. And he's goes from the furthest 4 feet to touching the gun, correct?
Yes.
That calls for speculation.
It's a, doctor answered yes. Overall,
And your opining regarding the order of shots, is that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty or medical certainty? I apologize.
Medical certainty, as I pointed out, from the autopsy findings alone, you can't put these in order. It's only by reviewing the video and simply looking at the orientation of his body and comparing that to the findings on the body that you can do that. So to that degree of certainty, it appears that he's in that horizontal position.
And Mr. Krause asked it, the shot to the pelvis, you think is first?
I think that makes the most sense.
Okay. The shot that goes in the scalp, second?
No, I think that the only orientation that makes sense with the trajectory of the gunshot wound to the back and the right side of the head is when he's in more of a horizontal position. So those 2 injuries must be the 3rd and the 4th injuries. But that's the best I can do.
The head wound goes back to front and from the top of the head down towards the forehead.
That's right.
Okay, so if I was charging like a bull and diving, that would be consistent.
It would be.
I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Doctor, the injuries you noted, they'd also be consistent with falling after being struck in the hip?
Yes.
So if Mr. Rosenbaum was struck in the hip, that his momentum kept carrying him forward, he was falling, the other 3 shots could have been as he was falling.
That's possible too.
It's consistent with that.
It is.
What is a muzzle stamp?
Well, a muzzle stamp is what we briefly talked about earlier with contact gunshot wounds, and if the energy of the bullet entering the body causes the skin to smack against the muzzle of the gun, it can leave an abrasion, even a patterned abrasion in the shape of the muzzle of the gun on the skin. And so a muzzle stamp is a term that's used for a contact abrasion that's associated with a contact gunshot wound. And the reason why, when we talked about a close range wound to the hand, the reason why we didn't talk about that, although it could be in close range like that, is because the skin of the palm is much thicker, and it very seldom, if ever, allows for a muzzle stamp or an abrasion of that sort. Certainly not like you would see with a contact wound to the head or to the chest.
So there was no muzzle stamp in this case?
No.
Okay, I'd like to ask Investigator Stu to pull up Exhibit 41, but as we're doing that, Doctor, if this is the gun, if you could stand up, please. If I'm holding a rifle, let's just say that I've shot you in the hip, how does it make sense that the gunshot to the hand occurs in the trajectory you've indicated?
So this points in the direction. Oh, thank you.
Can you
Here's
just stand back
Hold
there?
that.
No, I know, I'm fine here.
Okay, so we're talking about the left hand. The injuries are to the palmar surface of the index and the middle fingers. The exit is to the side of the index finger. So obviously it's hard to do this completely, but it's like this. So in the anatomic position, it looks like that. But keeping in mind that your arm and your hand move in a lot of different ways. So, so if you were to take the hand and you were to be in a position in which the hand was like this with the palm kind of downward, you could orient this so that you could explain the gunshot wound going down and hitting the pavement, and then the fragments hitting the left side of the thigh.
If you could put your hand out again, doctor, like you had. So, but the barrel would have to be behind the injury, correct?
Yes.
So the bullet would have had to travel outside of the barrel, so the barrel would have been had to have been in front of or somehow separated from where the wound took place.
Well, that's what I said. I can't tell that. This is a close range wound with soot, but there isn't going to be a muzzle stamp because of the skin of the palm. So it's within that distance, but whether it's in contact or whether it's just in front of it, of the entrance portion of the wound, or inches away, that's not something I can tell you.
You just indicated be consistent with swiping something away? Swiping a barrel away?
I can't tell you what he was doing at the time that happened. All I can tell you is that at the time of the discharge of the weapon and the traveling of that bullet into his hand, this is the trajectory that it took through his hand. I can't tell you what he was doing at the time, and I can't see it on the video. The video is not good enough for that.
Exhibit 41, please. Could holding something in your hand, could that impact the wounds or the stippling or the soot or anything of that nature?
You mean, well, I mean, if you're holding something in your hand and you're referring to some kind of something that's going to create an intermediary target or something, yeah, that can affect the appearance of wounds. You know, the injury might look very different in that case.
So when Attorney Richards was talking to you about the wound to Mr. Rosenbaum's left hand, and there's blood everywhere and there's soot in many places, if he was holding, say, a handle of something, would you expect that the soot and the
There's been no evidence whatsoever that he had anything in his hand.
Questions must be asked to a reasonable degree of post-mortem autopsy certitude. Would that be a fair way to put it?
I'm not really sure I understand the question.
You're not the first. You hesitated before when asked about medical certitude, which is a common expression we use in the courts, and I'm trying to see what degree of, how would you phrase the degree of certitude with which you would typically respond?
Well, I can testify to a reasonable degree of medical certainty when I'm using the autopsy findings and the meaning of those in reference to the injuries. I've seen the video. As I have testified, I discussed the video with regards to his position when I heard the gunshot wounds discharge. I can't really see what's going on in front of him at those times. So when the questions are going into those specifics, I don't think I can answer those from the video that I watched. So I think I'm trying to be careful not to evaluate that video more than I used it for, which is to determine what position he was in when those gunshot wounds were received.
Why don't you rephrase your question? What's required here for the state certainly, but frankly for both parties, but is a degree of certitude to which the physician can testify.
The injuries and everything you testified to on the left hand, that's consistent with nothing being in his hand?
It is, yes.
Thank you. I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 41. If you can tell, is this the video that you reviewed in terms of both the shooting deaths of Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Huber?
It is.
I'd ask you to play the video until I ask you to stop.
Hey!
Can you see where on there you indicate that he would be positioned with the first shot?
Yes, I can clearly see the reflection of the light on his back, and I can see that he's upright when the first shot is heard.
So that would not be consistent with the shot to the hand?
No, I think that placing the hand in that position would affect the gunpowder stippling to his lower abdomen. So I don't think the hand is involved in that first shot.
So, to the best of your, so it's consistent that the first shot is to the hip?
That's what I think, yes.
And the second shot would be to the hand?
Yes.
And then the third or fourth shot, can you order those any more specifically?
No.
But they would be as he's in a horizontal position, perhaps falling after being struck in the hip.
That's right.
Let's show Exhibit 86, please. Play the exhibit. I'll ask you to pause it. Pause. Doctor, did you see that large amount of smoke that was emitted from the gun?
Yes.
Now, with that amount of smoke out of an AR-15, would that impact how far the stippling may occur?
Would the smoke impact?
The large amount of smoke? Would the stippling go further out than the 4 feet?
No, I don't think there's not a relationship there. The stippling is the gunpowder particles that are flying through the air and dispersing as they travel. The smoke is the smoke and soot from the barrel of the gun.
Does the amount of gunpowder matter in the stippling?
Well, yes,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it does. I mean, there's the number of gunpowder particles that leave the barrel of the gun are not predictable, certainly, but they will travel in a dense group and then disperse as they get farther away, with more and more falling to the side until none have the energy to create stippling to the skin.
Now, when you see that large puff of smoke, you said that would be that is what would potentially leave soot on a individual?
My presumption is that soot, that puff was the smoke and soot from the end of the gun.
So with that large amount of soot, would it be possible to deposit soot further out than just a few inches?
I don't know if I can answer that question. Test firing the weapon, you might be able to derive more information, but certainly soot's not very aerodynamic. It doesn't travel very far.
Now, Attorney Richards did a demonstration with you where he stood about 4 feet away and talked about the intermediate range. Now, we're in talking about intermediate range, you're talking about feet from the barrel of the gun, not from the shooter?
Correct. To be specific, the injuries that we're talking about are from the barrel of the gun to the surface that they make impact with. So the surface of the body in this case.
And you haven't seen the actual weapon in this case, have you?
No, I have not.
That's on the stand over there.
Oh, it's in the stand too.
Oh. So I'm going to ask Detective Venturini to point the gun at me.
Check it again. Yeah. Check it again.
No need.
Show you.
Okay.
Empty. Goes against every training I've ever had.
So if he was to point the gun at me, I'd have to be 4 feet from the barrel of this gun, or 1 to 4 feet to generate the stippling you're talking about?
Inside of 4 feet, like I said, that's an outside number.
Is that approximately where I would be right now?
It's about 4 feet, maybe a little closer.
I'll get a ruler. That's more than 4 feet.
It would be my impression that is a greater distance than 4 feet.
Well, I'm not bad at distances. Is this 4 feet approximately?
It's a little hard to tell, but you're closer. You're probably about 4 feet there.
More than one of my arm's lengths anyway?
More than one of your arm's length.
Thank you.
Request?
Doctor, the soot is within 6 inches, correct? The soot stippling?
Oh, the soot. The soot is within inches.
The intermediate gunpowder stippling is within 4 feet.
Approximately, yes.
And if the first shot is, you can hold it. Here. Detective. Keep it in this is the barrel of the gun, and the 0 shot is the first shot. And somewhere from, and I'm not as good as, or as bad, I don't know, but let's say this is about 4 feet from the barrel of the gun.
It's a little farther than 4 feet. I would say.
Okay, so I'm even a little bit further. But from the furthest he is would be 4 feet. He could have been as close as here with the first shot, correct?
Possibly, but the density of the gunpowder stippling is it's pretty spread out, so I think it's a little further away.
And I'm using my right hand because I'm down.
You know, these gloves got into court here about 10 years ago, and I understand there are appropriate times to use them, but not everything that,
I don't know why I'm using it.
I don't know why you're
What do I
putting a
do?
glove on, to be
Okay.
honest with you. You're not going to get the cooties from that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
These are bigger.
So here
Well, what difference does it make? It's
is the end of the gun, touching with my left hand like this. The heavy soot is right here.
Where you're with your right hand, but yeah,
The heavy, see, then I gotta go to the other side.
yeah, you have to
Missouri.
turn around.
Can you switch with me? So if it's the left hand, we're gonna go like right. Can you see this, doctor?
You actually have to turn your hand over.
Over,
And-
like this?
No, go the opposite direction, like this.
Like,
There you go.
okay. And you would then come in approximately here,
That's the entry point to the hand, yes.
exiting where I'm pointing with my index finger.
Correct.
And the reason there's no soot stippling here is because it's past where fire comes up.
I can only say that there's no soot there.
Okay, there's no, okay.
I know these people are here for news purposes, the photographers, but I actually think for purposes of the record, I'd like them to come up and get a closer shot.
Am I positioning my hand correct?
I believe so.
It would be more like this because the exit wound is right here, as I pointed.
Yes.
And just so the record's clear, my hand is touching the end of the barrel.
Your hand is now touching the barrel.
Okay? And if my hand were in front of the barrel, there would be soot here. And I'm pointing now to, what would you call this part of the fire, sir?
I would call it the outside of the pinky finger so that it's understandable.
The outside of the pinky finger, if my hand was in front of the barrel, the heaviest soot would be in that location, correct?
You would expect soot in that location.
And
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but some of the jurors I don't think are able to see, so let's, you got your shot. So, you go ahead.
the pinky finger, once again illustrating, the side of my hand, if it was in front of the barrel, as it's now depicted, the heaviest soot would be here.
You would expect some soot on that side of the hand.
And there is,
And I didn't see any.
I don't know.
Would you send copies of those photos, send copies of those photos to the clerk, please? Send copies of those photos to the clerk? Thank you.
So, doctor, is it consistent if I'm approaching the detective and I'm struck in my hip, fracturing my hip, that I would fall, reach out with my hand and try to knock the gun away?
That's a possibility.
Am I positioning my hand correctly with the evidence?
your hand is, you put your hand over
We don't know if it's over, so.
like this. Well, just in a position so that the soot is on the palmar surface,
Like this?
like this. So if you go in and you,
So the entrance wound is here.
no, the entrance wound is on the palmar surface, the undersurface.
Palmar surface.
So if you do it, Superman, and then turn your hand a little bit like this, you can put it in a position that there you go,
Like this.
like that.
So what you're saying is consistent with being shot here, momentum carry forward, and swiping at the gun. That would be consistent with the injuries you found.
Those scenarios are possible.
But my hand is positioned correctly to create the injuries that you found.
But that's the position that the hand has to be in.
And then the bullet would have traveled down and potentially kicked up some bullet fragments and concrete and hit my leg.
That's what I think happened.
And then I would have continued down, and then the shot to the head and the mid-back would have occurred as I was falling down.
As you were more horizontal to the ground, yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Doctor, when you get shot the first time, that doesn't cause you to go forward, correct?
It shouldn't cause you to go forward, backward, or
Okay.
anything.
So he already, Mr. Rosenbaum, already had to have forward momentum at a force to go from the 0 shot to the second shot in 2.26 hundredths of a second to be in contact or right on top of that barrel, correct?
Yes, he had forward momentum.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. You may step down. Let's break for lunch. It has just arrived, I think, and we'll take until around 12:30. Any questions? Okay, please don't talk about the case. Read, watch, or listen to any account. See you later. On occasion, when things don't, they're not going to show up well in the record, I'll either myself or have one of the parties take a picture. So we have experts to do it today, and the price was right. Mark? Send them to Mrs. Yeah.
What time would you like us back?
12:30?
Well, Your Honor, I do want to indicate on the record now that the state intends to rest. We've had some discussions regarding the testimony of Brandon Cramen. My understanding from the defense is that I think there's an agreement that essentially the court will just inform the jury that his testimony should be disregarded. and we're not gonna go back into that.
Stricken.
Okay.
Right.
Fair enough.
So I don't know when we want to address any motions outside the presence of the jury, but that's what I intend to do when we return.
Okay. Are there going to be any motions? Huh?
One,
Okay. Okay,
once they officially rest, if that's what's happened.
yeah, go ahead.
Do we need to go over criminal records for any witnesses?
Yeah, I think we do. Your Honor, I'll tell you what it is. I'm not trying to hide from the court. They have not put in any evidence regarding a lawful order for a curfew violation. We'll be moving to dismiss that. We'll be renewing our objection to the count 6, but the court has already ruled, just so it's not waived. I think then we're ready to go.
All right. As to this 7th count, did you want to address that there's no evidence on the,
We've had testimony from the detective that a curfew was in place.
It's not a lawful order.
did he testify as to by whom the order had been issued?
No.
I don't know about that one. Yeah, I would expect that there would have to be just the mere statement that a detective said that there was a curfew in effect doesn't really satisfy the burden of proof. I will permit you to reopen the evidence, however. No, I don't want to. This is.
Well,
I'm pretty.
he just said he closed. That's why I brought it up.
No. You know
Your
what?
Honor,
You
I'll say this.
know what? There are some judges. When I went to judges training years ago, this is back a long time ago, right after I came on the bench, I sat down with some judges, and one was from Madison and was testifying about this. She didn't know what to do because she's got the pending burglary case, and she says they didn't prove that the city of, I'm going to say Middleton, but maybe it was Madison, one of the two, didn't prove that it was in Dane County, and she didn't know whether to grant the motion to dismiss or not. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. We're here to get to the truth of things, and I don't want to mess around with an error in presentation of that magnitude, or what's the opposite of magnitude?
That he didn't have the authority in another court to issue that order.
That is another issue. So actually, the easy course would be to grant your motion, so I won't have to enter the thicket that the other judge did. But I'll take it. I'll take this weighty matter under advisement. Yeah, I know it. I'm not going to dismiss it on the ground that it wasn't proved. Whether I grant it on the basis that Judge Rossell did is another matter. I'll have to take a look at that. And then I'd like you to submit in the next day proposed instructions, modified version of 2176 with because Mr. Kraus did a nice job on the brief and reported what the instructions committee said. And so I'd like both sides to submit proposed instructions on 2176. Okay?
Yeah. Very good.
All right. Enjoy your lunch. left here, I'm going to tell the jury that, well, I'm going to tell them that the testimony of witness
I think it was Brandon.
trying to find the witness. Let's see.
Brandon Craven.
Yeah.
Brandon Raymond, was incomplete, and because the law requires that it be fully presented, that I'm going to strike it in its entirety. Okay, and then I had indicated before we wrote that the state could reopen the case on forfeiture action as we have evidence on it.
We are to stand on the record as it's currently constituted, Your Honor.
All right. I think the evidence you offered was a statement by a deputy sheriff, by a city of Kenosha police officer that there was a curfew in effect, and that's the extent of it?
Yes.
I don't believe that that's sufficient.
It's not. A motion is granted. Up to 7 is dismissed on its merits. Anything else before we start?
There appears to be, Judge. Our first witness is Nicholas Smith. Mr. Binger has informed me that, I guess I can let him tell you this, but that he has 2 juvenile adjudications. The year, can you tell me the years, Tom?
They're both from April 30th, 2014 here in Kenosha.
So I don't know how last
How
time.
old was he at the time?
He would have been 16. He is now 23.
Hand me the.
There have been other criminal cases since then. There were 3 or 4 pending criminal cases that were resolved with pleas, one to disorderly conduct and one to violation of a temporary restraining order. That was from April of 2016. And then in May of this year, both of those adult convictions were expunged.
Okay, well, those are not going to count.
I understand that, but they're.
Your point that shows persistent lawless behavior. Give me the. I guess I could. I guess I have the ability to look at it.
I can give you the case numbers if you'd like.
Please.
14 JV 36.
Let me get to that. Number?
14 JV 36.
And the other?
14 JV 101.
you want to say anything? I'm going to count it as 2.
So the question is, have you ever been adjudicated delinquent, not convicted of a crime, right?
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Just so. Do you understand that, Mr. Smith? Okay. And that's the only thing you answer is that number.
Okay, ready to go?
I am ready.
Okay.
Formally arrest in front of the jury first.
Yeah, please do. Would you come down, please?
Yes.
All right, you may be seated. Welcome back, and a couple of things. First off, there was testimony given by Brandon Kramen, an employee of the FBI, which was incomplete. It was interrupted, and because it was interrupted, it wasn't heard in full, and for that reason, I'm going to strike all of that testimony, and you must disregard that entirely. Any question about that? Okay. Number 2, the 7th count of the information accused the defendant of violation of a curfew, and that case is no longer part of the action here. So the information remains with 6 counts in it, and I'll instruct you further on those at the close of the case. But the 7th count of curfew violation is no longer part of the contest here. Okay, thank you. Mr. Binger.
Your Honor, the state formally rests its case.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sharafazi, the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. We would call Nicholas Smith.
Stand, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated.
Sir, will you please state your name and spell it slowly for Madam Reporter?
Nicholas Smith, Nicholas, Smith, Smith.
And Mr. Smith, I'm not looking for your specific physical address, but where do you live?
Here in Kenosha,
And how old are you right now?
23.
Have you ever been adjudicated delinquent in the past?
Yes, I believe.
How many times?
What does that mean? Can you clarify what that means?
Of how many offenses were you adjudged a juvenile delinquent?
1, I believe, as a delinquent.
If I told you it was 2?
It might be.
Okay. Now, are you currently employed, sir?
Yes,
And what kind of work do you do?
I work at a factory.
Right. And if I could, are you familiar with a business called Car Source?
Yes, I am.
And how are you familiar with that business?
I worked for them.
You worked for them?
Yes, I worked for Car Source, and I've known the owners for 10 years.
And who are the owners?
Sam, Sal, their dad, their mom, and
And do you remember when you worked for them specifically?
2018 to 2019.
So you worked for them 2018 to 2019, but you've known them for about a decade?
Close to a decade, yes.
And what I want to do, if I can, is direct your attention to August 24th of 2020. Okay?
Okay.
So that would be the day prior to the shootings involving Mr. Rittenhouse.
Yes.
On that day, did you have any contact at all with anybody from Car Source?
Yes, I did.
And who was that contact with?
Sam.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury what that contact was?
The night of the 24th, I'd received a phone call from Sam stating that his car doctor was on fire and asked if we could do anything.
Okay, now I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you, we've heard this at length here, but if I said to you the car doctor has been previously pointed out as this Car Source right here between 59th and 60th, is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, and that is what is commonly known to you as the car doctor.
Correct.
All right, and you had said that Sam had asked you for your assistance?
Me and one other.
Do you know who that was?
The one other person?
Yeah.
Yes, that was Justin Hamilton.
And to your knowledge, did Mr. Hamilton, had he worked for Car Source in the past?
For 10 years, yes.
And on the 24th, what were you asked to do?
Sam had asked if we could do anything about the fires. Asked both of us.
And did you?
Yes.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did?
Approximately around 9 o'clock, I'd received a phone call from Sam stating that car doctor was on fire and asked if we could do anything. And then not too long after, I received a phone call from Justin stating that he was going to car doctor to put out the fires. When they arrived, Justin and his son, Austin, who was a previous employer for Car Source as well, when they arrived, we called Sam, and Sam had said that the body shop door, garage door, was unlocked, and to gain entry so that we could access the power washers and the buckets with inside Car Source so that we could put out the fires.
So was Sam, he wasn't down there with you, is that fair?
No, he was not.
Okay. He just had given you guys information as to what he was hoping that you would do.
Correct.
And the information as to, well, I'll ask it to you this way, was the car doctor building locked?
No, the front door was, but the back door was not. The body shop door.
And did you gain access then to the shop?
Correct. He gave us permission.
And what did you do upon gaining?
We turned on the lights inside the building so that we could locate the power washer and all the buckets. And we proceeded to unlock the front door and put out the fires. And we had numerous amounts of bystanders help us as well that were also helping us put out the fires.
Now, on the 24th, was there anybody there physically protecting the business?
No.
And when you got there, what was the condition? I'll ask you, were there fires going on at that point or
Yes.
not? And that was at the car doctor location?
Correct.
So were you able then to combat the fires, deal with those fires?
Correct.
Okay. At any point on the 24th, did you see anybody associated with Car Source or Car Doctor down there?
In the morning of the 24th, yes.
Morning of the 24th or the 25th?
Not at that night, no, I did not. The morning of the 25th, I did.
Okay.
Sorry.
So 24th, You're putting out the fires.
Correct.
You then go home at some point?
Correct.
What time do you think you left the car, Doctor?
1 a.m. Around 1 a.m. Anywhere between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m.
Now, if I can ask you about the 25th. On the 25th, do you have any contact with anybody from CarSource?
Yes, I do.
And who is that?
Sam.
And how do you have contact with Sam?
He calls me in the morning of the 25th asking if I could provide assistance to watch over the building later in that night. He called me and Justin Hamilton.
So at that point, he's not asking you to, if I have this right, he's not asking you to put out fires, he's asking for help protecting the business? Is that what
Correct.
he said? And how do you respond to that?
I say yes. I can help him. I can watch over the building.
And have you at that point kind of formulated a plan on what you're going to do?
Yes.
And what's that plan?
I had called my other friends who also had previously worked there, and our plan was we were going to set up on the roof and stay there most of the night watching the building.
And when you say that you had talked to or were planning on talking to your friends, who were they?
Austin Hamilton, Colin Doherty, and Justin Hamilton.
And did you have contact with those people at some point on the 25th?
Correct.
I'll ask you this way. What time did you get the call from Sam?
Early in the morning, anywhere between 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Not 10 p.m., 10 a.m.
And what time do you think you had contact with or spoke to the Hamiltons, the people that you were talking about?
Around 11 a.m. They first called me, and then I called Colin, and that was so around 11 a.m.
So after 11 a.m., is it fair to say that you believe you have like a plan in your head and people to help you with that plan?
Correct.
After 11 a.m., is there anything else, or is there something that happens that puts you in contact with anybody else that ends up there that night?
Yes.
And who is that?
Dominic Black.
And can you tell the jury what that contact with Mr. Black was?
I had noticed Dominic Black around the afternoon, 3 or 4 p.m. He was downtown, and I needed somebody to give me a ride to go buy some body armor because I had not planned on being armed that night. And he said he would give me a ride, and Kyle was with him. They came to my house around 4 p.m., 3 or 4 p.m. in that afternoon, picked me up, and I do not remember exactly what transpired after that, but Kyle ended up lending me his body armor and dropping me off, and they asked where I was going.
Okay, I'm going to slow you down for a second.
Correct.
Okay. So you had said that you saw a Snapchat.
Correct.
I'm not familiar with Snapchat, but so it's like a video or something?
Yes, correct. I saw a Snapchat video of Dominic downtown,
And
Kenosha.
you then, from that Snapchat, reached back out to him?
Correct. I reached out to Dominic.
And you had mentioned that you were looking for or wanted some body armor, right?
Correct.
And that, you tell me what you wanted that for.
I had not planned on being armed, and I wanted a means of protecting myself, and body armor was the next best suit for it.
Now, you had said that you didn't plan on being armed. Was there a particular reason that you didn't plan on being armed?
We planned on being on the roof, and I see no reason that I was going to need to be armed.
Based on your location?
Correct. We were going to be on the roof. I did not foresee myself needing a firearm or having any confrontation with anyone needing to have a firearm.
And you had said that, if I have it right,